Have you ever thought that the person you considered insignificant, the one you mocked, the one who always stood like a janitor cleaning up your mess, would one day come forward and turn your entire world upside down? That person, the one you laughed at, the one you humiliated, is now the new CEO of this company, and you never even realized it. A moment will come, a moment, when you'll realize that you made the biggest mistake of your life. When he stands before you, with all the power in his hands, and asks, "If you had known who I was, would you have treated me the same way?" That moment will shake you to your core, and you'll regret it. You'll realize you've lost everything because you never thought that the person you belittled would one day become the one to control your destiny. This story will touch the deepest parts of your heart, and you'll learn that you should never underestimate anyone because fate is always changing. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our new videos. And tell us, where are you watching this video from? Drop your city's name in the comments and let us know. The office was bustling with the usual rhythm of corporate life. The sleek floors of Kingsley Enterprises echoed with the click-clack of heels, the hum of conversation, and the low murmur of people working. But amidst all of this, one figure stood out, not because of power, not because of wealth, but because of his uniform: Jordan Carter, the janitor. Jordan had been at Kingsley Enterprises for 3 years. Every morning, he arrived at the crack of dawn, donned his faded blue uniform, and began his work without a word. His world was one of cleaning supplies, mops, and floors, and no one seemed to care. They never noticed him, they never saw him. To them, he was invisible, but little did they know, today was different. Today, everything was going to change. In the break room, Kevin Matthews and Amanda Whitmore, two of the company's most senior employees, stood by the coffee machine, snickering as they watched Jordan pushing his mop across the floor. "Look at him, Kevin," Amanda laughed, her voice dripping with condescension. "He doesn't even realize he's just a stepping stone for the rest of us." "A janitor for life," Kevin chuckled, taking a sip of his coffee. "I can't believe we pay him for this, a guy like that. He's lucky to even have this job." Jordan, who had been quietly cleaning the floor, heard every word. He didn't react, didn't even flinch. He had learned to ignore the whispers, the judgment, the humiliation. But something inside him was stirring today. A fire had been lit, and he wasn't going to let it go out. As the day wore on, the tension in the air grew heavier. Jordan walked through the halls with his usual quiet grace, his mop trailing behind him. But today, there was a subtle difference. He was no longer just cleaning. Today, Jordan was watching. He was observing, and he was remembering. In the conference room, Robert Kingsley, the CEO of Kingsley Enterprises, sat at the head of the table, preparing for a big announcement. The board of directors was there, as well as the senior executives. They chatted amongst themselves, unaware of the storm brewing just outside the door. Robert cleared his throat and stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but filled with a hidden pride, "we are about to witness a major shift in our company. Today marks a new chapter for Kingsley Enterprises." Everyone in the room nodded, eager to hear what was coming next. They had no idea what was about to unfold. Just then, the door opened, and in walked Jordan Carter. His mop still in his hand, his janitor's uniform still in place. The room fell silent. The air grew thick with confusion. Kevin's eyes widened as he stared at Jordan, still holding the mop, still wearing the same uniform that they had mocked him for. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. Amanda's face drained of color. Her smirk faltered, and she couldn't hide the disbelief in her eyes. "Jordan." Robert's voice was calm, but there was a sense of pride in his tone. "Come here, son." The room was frozen. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward Jordan. They were all trying to process what was happening. Why was the janitor standing there? Was this some kind of joke? Jordan walked to the front of the room, his posture straight, his gaze unwavering. He stood next to his father. "Robert Kingsley, ladies and gentlemen," Jordan spoke, his voice smooth, his words dripping with authority. "I assume you have many questions. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jordan Carter Kingsley. I am the firstborn son of Robert Kingsley, and as of today, I am your new CEO." The room erupted into whispers, a shock, confusion, disbelief. No one knew what to say. Kevin's face had gone pale, Amanda's mouth hung open, but she couldn't find the words. The man they had mocked, humiliated, and treated like dirt was now standing before them as the one person who held their future in his hands. Jordan let the silence hang for a moment, watching each of them carefully. He could feel the weight of their gazes, the judgment in their eyes. But today, that didn't matter. He wasn't invisible anymore. "I have worked in this building as a janitor," Jordan continued, his voice steady but sharp. "For the past few days, I've watched every single one of you. I've seen how you treat people. I've seen how you treat me. You thought you were untouchable, that I was beneath you." He turned his gaze to Kevin, locking eyes with him. "Kevin Matthews," he said, his voice cold. "You assumed I was nothing. You mocked me. You laughed in my face. You treated me like I was less than human." Kevin's breath caught in his throat. He had no response. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but he couldn't, because deep down, he knew Jordan was right. He had been cruel, he had been arrogant, and now, he was paying the price. Jordan took a step toward him, and Kevin instinctively took a step back. But Jordan wasn't done. He turned his head toward Amanda. "Amanda Whitmore," he said, his voice softer, but no less powerful. "You threw coffee across a table and made me clean it up. In front of everyone, you humiliated me. You treated me like I was nothing, but now you're looking at the man who holds your future in his hands." Amanda's face was pale. Her hands trembled as she clutched her dress, her eyes darting around the room in search of an escape. But there was no escape. There was nowhere to run. Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Let me ask you something, Amanda. If you had known who I was from the start, would you have treated me differently?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I would have." Jordan nodded once, a small smile playing on his lips. "Exactly. And that's the problem. You treated me based on what you thought I was, not who I truly am." The room was silent, every person hanging on his words. Jordan's gaze swept over them all, lingering on the ones who had been silent in the face of his humiliation. He knew who they were, he had seen it all. Then, his eyes locked back on Kevin. "Kevin," he said, his voice colder now, "you mocked me. You belittled me, but I'm not the one who's powerless anymore. You are." Kevin's knees felt weak. His hands shook as he struggled to stay upright. He had lost everything in that moment. His career, his dignity, his place in the company. Then, Jordan turned to Robert. His father, the man who had built this empire, who had trusted the wrong people to run it. But Robert wasn't angry, he was ashamed. Ashamed of what his company had become. Robert stepped forward and looked at Kevin and Amanda. "Jordan," he said, his voice filled with pride, "what do you think should be done?" Without hesitation, Jordan looked at Kevin, then Amanda, and with a calmness that was almost terrifying, he said, "Fire them." Robert nodded. "Kevin Matthews," he said, his voice final, "your employment at Kingsley Enterprises is terminated, effective immediately." Kevin staggered backward, his face a mask of shock. No, please," he pleaded. But it was too late. Amanda Whitmore, Robert continued, your position is revoked. You are no longer employed here. Amanda let out a strangled cry, but there was no sympathy, there was no second chance. They had crossed a line, and now they would pay for it. Jordan turned to the rest of the employees. Some of you stood by and did nothing, he said, but some of you showed kindness, and for that, you will be rewarded. He turned to Linda, a woman who had always been kind to him, who had never looked down on him. Linda, he said, his voice warm for the first time today, you're being promoted to supervisor. The room was stunned. Linda's eyes welled up with tears as she stepped forward. Shocked and grateful for the recognition, Jordan turned back to the employees. This company will no longer be built on arrogance or privilege, he said, his voice resonating with power. It will be built on respect. And if you can't respect each other, then there is no place for you here. The room was silent as everyone processed the weight of his words. Jordan Carter was no longer the janitor, he was their CEO, and he wasn't going to let them forget it. It was a quiet Thursday morning when everything started to unravel. The glassy building of Kingsley Enterprises stood tall, reflecting the city's vibrant life. Yet inside, an unexpected storm was brewing. No one could have predicted what was about to unfold, a betrayal so deep, a secret so dark, that it would send shockwaves through the entire company. Inside the boardroom, the top executives had gathered for the quarterly meeting. The large mahogany table was filled with the company's wealthiest and most powerful people. Robert Kinglesey, the CEO, stood at the head of the table, his usual confidence intact as he addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a fantastic quarter, he said, flashing a bright smile. Our profits are at an all-time high, and we're on track to expand into international markets next year. But, he paused, his expression turning serious. There is something we need to address. There is someone in this room who has been undermining our success, and it's time to come clean. At this, a cold hush fell over the room. The faces of the executives, usually so composed, flickered with unease. Who could it be? The room was full of the most trusted people in the company. Could there be a mole? Let's not waste any time, Robert said, as he motioned to the screen behind him. The projector whirred to life, revealing a series of emails and messages that no one expected to see. The documents were damning. They revealed internal company secrets, strategic plans, and confidential financial data, all leaked to an unknown competitor. The room gasped. Everyone turned to look at one another, confused and shocked. How could this happen? They trusted each other, didn't they? Robert's eyes scanned the room before they landed on one person. Kevin Matthews, the head of operations, whose expression had gone pale. Kevin had been with the company for years, rising through the ranks with his sharp intellect and polished demeanor. But today, he looked like a man whose world was falling apart. Kevin, Robert's voice was steady but laced with a dangerous edge. Care to explain? Kevin's face turned white. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The sweat was visible on his brow as he began to realize the gravity of the situation. I don't know what you're talking about, Kevin stammered, his voice shaking. But his unease was apparent to everyone in the room. Before he could say anything else, Robert clicked a button, and a video began to play. It was a surveillance recording from a few days earlier, taken in the middle of the night when the office was empty. The video showed Kevin sneaking into the company's vault, accessing confidential files, and emailing them to someone. His face was clear in the footage, the dark shadows of the night doing nothing to obscure his identity. The room erupted into chaos. The other executives exchanged shocked looks, some covering their mouths in disbelief. Kevin, the trusted head of operations, had been the traitor all along. How had no one seen it coming? Kevin's back was against the wall now. There was nowhere to hide. He looked around the room, desperate for an escape, but all eyes were on him. His face reddened with humiliation and anger. "No!" Kevin finally shouted, his voice cracking. "You don't understand. I didn't do it. I swear." He was practically pleading now. "There's someone else behind this. Someone else is framing me, but no one was buying it." The evidence was clear. The video didn't lie. Who? Rober's voice was cold now, his patience wearing thin. "Who would frame you, Kevin?" Kevin opened his mouth, then closed it again. His mind raced, his thoughts scattered like 1,000 puzzle pieces that didn't fit together. He knew the truth, but he couldn't say it. The fear of implicating someone even more dangerous kept him silent. Then, just as the tension in the room reached a boiling point, a voice cut through the chaos. "I can explain." Everyone turned, their eyes widening with surprise. The voice belonged to none other than Jordan Carter, the janitor who had been working at Kingsley Enterprises for the past 3 years. His presence had always been overlooked by everyone in the company, but today, it was different. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was about to drop a bombshell. Jordan walked up to the front of the room with a calm demeanor, unfazed by the shocked looks of the executives. He wasn't wearing his usual janitor's uniform. Instead, he was dressed in a sharp suit, his hair neatly combed. In an instant, he went from invisible to the most important person in the room. "I've been watching," Jordan said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I've been watching all of you, the lies, the betrayals, the games you've played. I know what's been going on in this company for years." The room fell silent, the shock of Jordan's words leaving everyone speechless. No one had expected this. Who was this man, and how did he know so much? "Jordan, what are you talking about?" Rober said, his voice now laced with suspicion. "You've been a janitor here. What could you possibly know?" Jordan's eyes locked with Kevin's, and the tension in the air thickened. "I know enough to know that Kevin didn't act alone," he said, his voice now cold. "He's been manipulated by someone much more powerful." Kevin's face twisted in confusion. "What are you saying? What do you mean?" Jordan took a deep breath before revealing the shocking truth. "I've known for a while," he said, his voice low. "I'm not just a janitor, I'm the son of the real owner of Kingsley Enterprises." Gasps filled the room as the executives recoiled in disbelief. How could this be possible? Rober's face contorted in anger, but a flicker of something else, fear, passed through his eyes. He had known something was off, but he hadn't expected this. "You." Rober's voice trembled. "You're lying." "No," Jordan replied, his tone unwavering, "I'm not. You all think you've been running the show, but my father, he's been watching from the shadows. I've been working here, gathering intel, learning the truth about everything that's been going on. You, Rober, have been embezzling funds from this company for years, and now it's time for you to pay." A stunned silence followed. The truth had come out, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. Kevin wasn't the only betrayer. Rober Kingsley, the man who had built the company, was behind it all. Kevin stood there, his face pale, unsure of what to do next. His world was crumbling. Rober, the man he had looked up to, was the true villain. But Jordan wasn't done yet. "And as for you, Kevin," Jordan continued, "I know you've been involved in the cover-up. You've been helping Rober steal from this company for years. You betrayed not just the company, but your own team, and now you'll pay the price." Kevin's face twisted with guilt and fear as he realized the full extent of his actions. "No, please, Jordan, I'm sorry, I didn't know." But Jordan's gaze was unwavering. He wasn't here for apologies, he was here to take control of what was rightfully his. "This is my company now," Jordan declared. "And you all will answer for what you've done." With that, Jordan turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving chaos in his wake. The room was in disarray, the truth now fully revealed. Kingsley Enterprises would never be the same again. It was supposed to be a normal day at work, like any other. The coffee machines were whirring, the phones were ringing, and the employees at Ashford Enterprises were doing what they did best, making deals, closing sales, and keeping the company running like a well-oiled machine. But little did they know, everything was about to change. In the heart of the high-rise building, nestled among the world's most powerful corporations, there was a man who held the key to a secret that could bring it all down. Aaron Caldwell, the CEO of Ashford Enterprises. A charismatic leader with the perfect balance of intellect and charm. He had always been adored by his employees, trusted by the board, and praised for his ability to make Ashford Enterprises a dominant player in the market. But as the morning progressed, something was different. The air was heavy, charged with an invisible tension. The usual hum of the office seemed quieter, almost eerie. No one knew that today would be the day that would change everything. It started with a simple email, a message that appeared on Aaron's computer screen, unread. A message he wasn't supposed to see. He had just finished a meeting when he opened it. The subject line read, "The truth will set you free." A chill ran down his spine. Who could have sent this, and why now? He clicked open the email, and as soon as he did, his eyes widened in shock. The email contained an attachment, a video. With a deep breath, he clicked play. The video revealed something that no one in the company had known. It showed a series of covert transactions between Ashford Enterprises and a rival company, Blackthorn Industries. But it wasn't just about business deals. The video showed something far more sinister, a web of corruption, manipulation, and betrayal. It became clear. Someone at Ashford had been playing a dangerous game. The video showed Aaron's closest allies, his trusted executives, exchanging information, bribing government officials, and hiding large sums of money in offshore accounts. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was a carefully orchestrated plan to bring down the company from the inside. Aaron's mind raced as he watched the video. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Could this be real? Was this a setup? The people he had trusted the most, the ones he had considered family, were involved in something dark. Something so deeply rooted in corruption that it would destroy everything he had worked for. But there was one name that stood out on the video. One name that made Aaron's heart stop. His own sister, Emily Caldwell. How could she be involved in this? She had always been by his side, supporting him, and had even worked as his right hand in the company. They had grown up together, shared everything, and he had never suspected her of any wrongdoing. But the video didn't lie. Aaron sat frozen in his chair, the weight of the discovery sinking in. His own blood, his sister, was at the center of this betrayal. He had to confront her. He had to know the truth, but there was no way he was going to approach this blindly. This was bigger than just family. This was about his legacy, his company, and his reputation. Without wasting a moment, Aaron called an emergency meeting. The top executives of Ashford Enterprises gathered in the conference room, their faces tense and uncertain. The room was filled with a mix of confusion and fear. What was happening? Why had Aaron called them in so urgently? As the meeting began, Aaron's voice cut through the silence, cold and steady. "I have just watched something that has shaken me to my core," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "There are people in this room who are betraying Ashford Enterprises. People who are feeding information to our competitors, sabotaging our deals, and lining their own pockets. And to my shock, my own sister Emily is at the center of this." Gasps filled the room. No one spoke. No one could believe it. Emily, the one person everyone had always admired, was now the face of betrayal. But as the tension thickened, it became clear, this wasn't just about Emily. It was about everyone in that room. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Emily entered, her face pale. She had no idea what had just unfolded, but the look in her brother's eyes told her everything she needed to know. Her heart dropped, and her mind raced. She tried to speak, but Aaron didn't let her. "You lied to me, Emily," he said, his voice breaking. "I trusted you more than anyone else in this world. How could you do this? How could you destroy everything we built?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but she remained silent. She couldn't find the words to explain, not when everything she had worked for was crashing down around her. The room was silent, but it was clear that no one knew what to do next. Then, in an unexpected twist, Emily broke her silence. "I didn't do this alone," she said, her voice trembling. "There's more to this than you think. Aaron, I didn't choose this path by myself. I was being controlled, threatened." Everyone turned toward her, bewildered. "What do you mean?" Aaron asked, his voice desperate for answers. Emily took a deep breath. "I was approached by someone who promised me everything I ever wanted: power, wealth, influence. They knew everything about me, everything about the company. They told me that I had no choice, that if I didn't cooperate, they would destroy not just Ashford Enterprises, but everything I held dear. My reputation, my future, my life. They said they had dared on me, things that would ruin me forever." Emily paused, tears now streaming down her face. "I thought I was doing it for us, for the company. I thought I was protecting us from something worse, but I was wrong. I see now that I was being manipulated, used as a pawn in someone else's game." Aaron's heart raced as the truth began to sink in. Someone had been pulling the strings all along. Someone had known Emily's deepest fears and vulnerabilities and used them against her. But who? Emily looked around the room, her eyes filled with regret. "It was one of you," she said, her voice trembling. "One of you in this room has been manipulating me all along." The room fell silent once more as the weight of her words hung in the air. The trust that had once bound them together was now shattered. Emily's admission had planted a seed of doubt in everyone's mind. Who could they trust? Who was the real mastermind behind this betrayal? Just as the tension reached its peak, Aaron's phone buzzed. It was a text message. He quickly glanced at it, and his heart skipped a beat. The message read, "The real traitor is closer than you think." Look deeper. Aaron's eyes widened. This wasn't over. The true mastermind was still out there, hiding in plain sight. And Aaron was about to uncover a shocking truth that no one was ready for. He turned back to the room, his voice low and firm. "This isn't just about Emily," he said. "The truth is far darker than we realize. We are not done here. Someone is still pulling the strings, and I will find out who it is, no matter the cost." As the room erupted in chaos and accusations, one thing was clear: the game had only just begun. Secrets were being uncovered, alliances were being tested, and the real betrayal was still waiting to be revealed. The story begins in a sleek, modern office building with large glass windows that overlook the city below. The camera pans across the bustling office environment, employees typing away at their desks, phones ringing, and meetings being held in the conference rooms. But amidst this corporate whirlwind, there's an unsettling sense of something looming over everyone, a silent tension that no one can quite put their finger on. At the heart of the building is Sarah Bennett, a sharp, ambitious executive at the pinnacle of her career. She had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, earning the respect of her colleagues and bosses alike. She was on the verge of landing a deal that could skyrocket her career to unimaginable heights. But Sarah was about to face the most shocking betrayal of her life, one that would unravel everything she thought she knew about trust, loyalty, and family. It all started one ordinary Thursday afternoon. Sarah had been working late into the evening, poring over contracts and preparing for the high-stakes meeting with investors the next day. As she sat in her office, the door creaked open. Her younger brother, Adam Bennett, walked in. Sarah smiled, happy to see him, as he rarely visited her at work. "Hey, Sarah," Adam greeted her, his usual carefree tone masking something underneath. Sarah looked up from her desk, noting the slight unease in his eyes. "Adam, what's up?" "You okay?" Sarah asked, pushing her papers aside. Adam hesitated, running a hand through his hair, clearly conflicted. I need to talk to you about something important. It's about the company, about the deal you're working on." At the mention of the deal, Sarah's curiosity piqued. Adam had always been involved in the tech side of the company, while she had focused on the business and financial aspects. She wondered what he could possibly have to say about it. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Adam took a deep breath and walked closer, lowering his voice. "I don't know how to say this, but I found something I think you need to see." Before Sarah could respond, Adam pulled out a small USB drive from his pocket and handed it to her. "I don't want to believe it, but I think it's true," he said, his voice shaking. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "What's on this?" Adam didn't answer. Instead, he turned and left the room, leaving Sarah alone with the mystery. She stared at the USB drive in her hand, her mind racing with 1,000 possibilities. What could he possibly have found, and why hadn't he told her sooner? Her hands trembled as she inserted the USB drive into her laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing a folder titled Project Amiga. She clicked on it, her curiosity and anxiety mounting. Inside, there were several encrypted files. She began to open the first one, and her breath caught in her throat. The document was a detailed report on the very deal she was working on, except it wasn't just about the business itself. It contained information about backdoor negotiations, secret contracts, and the involvement of a third-party company that Sarah had never heard of before. A name stood out: Lucian Gray. Sarah's mind raced. She had never heard of Lucian Gray, but the report indicated that this individual was secretly funding the deal and controlling a significant portion of the shares. This was more than just a business transaction, it was a takeover, a hostile one at that. The shocking revelation hit her like a ton of bricks. Everything she had worked for, everything she had built, was now at risk, but there was more. The files contained evidence that Lucian Gray wasn't just a businessman, he was connected to a criminal network, one that Sarah's company had unknowingly been funding. She clicked through more files, each one revealing more shocking details: corrupt dealings, shady connections, and money laundering activities. It was a web of lies and deceit that went far deeper than Sarah could have imagined. Her mind raced as the truth settled in. Her brother Adam had known about this for weeks, maybe even longer. But why hadn't he told her? Why hadn't he come to her sooner? Was he involved in this conspiracy? Was he part of the betrayal? Just as Sarah was about to close the laptop and confront Adam, the door to her office swung open. Her boss, Thomas Wright, entered with a stern look on his face. "Sarah, I need to speak with you about the upcoming investor meeting," he said, but his tone was cold, distant. Sarah looked up, her heart pounding. "Thomas, I need to talk to you about something else. Something urgent. It's about the deal." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her eyes widening in shock. It was a text from Adam. "Get out of the office. Don't trust Thomas, it's a setup." Her pulse quickened as panic set in. Was Adam warning her about Thomas? Was Thomas involved in this entire scheme? She had to make a decision, and she had to make it fast. Sarah, what's going on? Thomas pressed, his tone becoming more demanding. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed her things and bolted out of her office. She needed answers immediately. As she rushed down the hallway, she could hear Thomas's voice calling after her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The walls were closing in, and she was running out of time. Sarah made her way to the elevator, but just as she was about to step inside, she was stopped by a familiar voice. Leaving so soon, Sarah? She spun around to face her brother, Adam. He was standing there, his face unreadable. For a moment, she thought she saw guilt in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I had to make sure you got the message," Adam replied, his tone serious. "We don't have much time." Before Sarah could respond, a loud crash echoed through the building. The power went out, plunging the entire floor into darkness. Panic erupted in the hallway as people screamed and scrambled to find safety. Sarah's heart raced. Something was happening, and it was all connected to the conspiracy she had just uncovered. Adam grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the stairwell. "Come on, we have to go," he urged. As they made their way down the stairs, Sarah's mind was spinning. Who could she trust? Why was Thomas involved in this? Was Adam really trying to help her, or was he just another piece in this dangerous game? The truth was slipping further and further out of her grasp. But one thing was certain, the game was far from over. They finally reached the ground floor, only to find the building surrounded by police cars and armed officers. Sarah's heart sank as she realized that the entire situation was spiraling out of control. "Get in the car," Adam said urgently, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "What's going on?" Sarah asked. Feeling more confused than ever, Adam didn't answer. Instead, he pushed her into the car and slammed the door shut. As the vehicle sped away from the building, Sarah's mind raced. The betrayal she had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. There was more to the story, more lies, more players, and she was about to be pulled deeper into a web of corruption that she couldn't escape. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message, it was a video. She opened it to see the face of Lucian Gray, smirking into the camera. "I hope you're enjoying the show, Sarah," he said, his voice smooth and menacing. "This is just the beginning." The screen went black, and Sarah's blood ran cold. The game had changed, the stakes were higher than ever.